Welcome all. Coleman Report Live, 05-2020 edition. I love the numbers. Katie is with us, our editor. Mike Rosman, our special guest. Lance is AWOL. I think he's preparing for the webinar. So we got the three of us here. Hey, first of all, we'd love your questions. Thank you very much. I think we're caught up on them. Feel free to ask whatever questions you want. Mike's going to tell a little bit about what he's doing. But first, let's go to the poll questions, and then we'll bring Mike in. Are you comfortable with the current 1502 reporting guidelines?
I think generally, Bob, it's kind of this underlying question: are you comfortable with all the guidelines, right, and the kind of the shifting guidelines? But obviously, the 1502 is the recent one.
Yeah, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that. That's I think that's a consensus of the industry. Now we'll talk about it. It's been extended, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Number two, do you feel comfortable, do you feel SBA Treasury will make the necessary changes to make PPP more attractive to lenders? And I guess we should have expanded that, Mike. We should also say borrowers, right?
Well, it's funny. I don't know, certainly you guys followed Mnuchin's testimony yesterday, and there's a lot of pressure on Treasury to go ahead and expand the 8-week period to 24 weeks or something there, something like 24 weeks. And it's in the House bill as well, so it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
I would put, I don't know, Mike, how would you vote on this? What's your attitude?
So I think SBA and Treasury have been very thoughtful about the adjustments they're making. I think it's frustrating to everyone involved that they keep making adjustments or that adjustments are needed. But the simple truth is as more time passes and we learn more, we understand that changes are required. And the fact that they're willing to make them, I think, speaks volumes to the SBA and Treasury's commitment to help. And I think it's on both the bank side and the borrower side.
Do you have an opinion on this?
I think that, we've been talking a lot about how this really had to happen very quickly. And so looking back on it, it's very easy to criticize it. But I think the SBA and Treasury are listening to all of the complaints and suggestions from the industry, and they're really trying to incorporate that now. So I think it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I would put myself in the yes category. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but they're making adjustments. Mnuchin was very positive in his testimony to say, hey, this is bipartisan. I'm willing to do what you guys tell me to do, but we have to implement it. So I'm still optimistic. It's still a viable program. Mike, what type of volume is Wolflike doing?
So we had, we placed a ton of PPP loans, Bob. More than 750 million were moved over to banks, which is a big number for Wolflike, right? So that's a ton of volume for us. We had PPP loans coming, as you know, we do a lot within the franchise market, and we had loans coming from, more than 500 unique franchise brands, so underlying franchisees and brands that we'd never worked with who were turning to us, and it was loans ranging from as small as under $1,000 to $10 million. So it was a big array.
We had I don't know who mentioned a couple of weeks ago, there was a loan in Georgia for $300.
I think we're going to fight for the lowest loan value in having gone through Wolflike. In the end, as you know, Bob, we're not a direct lender. We work with bank lenders who actually fund the loans. We're thrilled to play that supportive role of connecting the borrower with the lender. I assure you that when we talk to our borrowers, they'd say, I'd never heard of that bank that I closed my loan with, but I'm glad I did, right? So we think it's a good opportunity.
Mike, you're dealing with a lot of franchisors, franchisees. What is the sense that you're getting what's happening with franchises on Main Street?
It's a crisis, like none I've ever seen before. So, you are regularly talking about economic cycles on on your show and the webinars you do, Bob. I think this is something like we've never experienced before. The scale of the crisis and the uncertainty, right? I think when we look at what people are experiencing, there's just great uncertainty about what it's going to look like. What is that new normal going to look like? And does it not kick in until we have a full vaccine? And is my region different than your region? Franchisors are doing very well by their franchisees to support them. but there's only so much that they can do when governments have businesses closed, and it's the big it's the big driver here is governments closing businesses for good reason, but it's an enormous pressure on these businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and we all have our personal stories that's affecting us. Hey, this is a big picture question, and I sort of like to know. A lot of us are working from home. How do you feel? Are you more, less, or I'm doing what I used to do? Mike, I'll start with you because you're working at home. Are you more, less, or no difference? But you always work out of the house, right?
No, so I actually do have an office, Bob. So I probably am slightly less productive. I have 4 kids who are, being homeschooled right now.
Stop right there. That's all you have to say.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. That's a, Mike, Katie's, we hired Katie back in August, and I have only met Katie once in almost a year. Can you believe that?
It's the new way.
Yeah.
I guess I got a head start on this.
We flew her back to Washington, so that's the only time I've met her. So, this is definitely the new normal. All right, Katie, what's going on with 1502?
So the deadline was originally going to be this Friday, and that has been bumped back a week. So it is now going to be on the 29th. And that was announced in the FAQ. It's question 48. So that's going to allow people to have a little bit more time. And it really comes from, there were a lot of small and medium-sized lenders who are saying that they're going to really have to delve deep to get all of the information to populate their 1502 reports. And they simply didn't think that they had enough time to do that and enough information to do that by the Friday deadline. So that's why it did get extended.
Mike, real quick, 1502, there are a number of ways of doing it. I know there's still lenders who are doing it on a spreadsheet. What's your recommendation for the lenders out there and the best way to process this?
Yeah, so really my advice is if you're new to SBA lending, phone a friend, right? So engage with your personal network of other banks out there. Talk to, obviously programs like yours, Bob, other trade associations, both ABA and Consumer Bankers and NAGL. But, if you don't have any experience, call your friends and find out how they're handling it. Obviously, there's software solutions to do it. I think you're right. There are banks that are kind of doing the old-fashioned spreadsheets, and to some extent, it may serve them fine because they've only got a little pile to go through. I will say, Bob, one of the things that, as and I appreciate you guys hosting our webinar tomorrow. We've had a lot of banks that don't have a lot of SBA experience who generated a lot of PPP loans, and they recognize the value in selling those loans because they don't want to have to understand 1502. They don't want to have to solve for forgiveness. They know it's going to be a shifting environment. So I think as it relates to kind of solving it in the short term, if you're not going to sell your loans or engage a servicer, which we're going to talk about tomorrow at 2, then you should be phoning a friend and getting some advice.
Yeah, and this is not rocket science. This is just fill out the form. It's really not that difficult. Since you brought it up, Mike, tell us what's going on tomorrow. Tomorrow is a sponsored webinar by Wolflike. It is a free event for Coleman attendees. And what are you going to be talking about, Mike?
Yeah, so what we've identified is a pathway for banks to sell their PPP loans, and it can be they can sell it with servicing, which I think if I were a bank, if I'm going to go ahead and sell, I want to unload that servicing component and kind of get back to doing my normal banking business. They can retain servicing as well, so they can sell the loan and retain servicing if it's a close client relationship. You can actually do a split where you sell some of your loans and keep some of your loans, and they can also engage a servicer to service for. So we know a lot, and you know this real well, Bob. A lot of banks got into the program. I think the number last I saw was more than 5,000 unique banks generated PPP loans.
You should say 5,000 lenders because that also includes credit unions, et cetera.
Well, and that's right. So 5,000 lenders, that's a great distinction. And of that 5,000 universe, maybe 1,500 made an SBA loan in the last year, maybe even less than that. So you have thousands of lenders who don't understand SBA well, who don't have the network that to plug and play with, and don't have the resources. And the drain it's been on banks has been significant. So I think what we know is that a lot of banks are interested in selling, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow.
Good, good. Well, we look forward to that, and that's going to be tomorrow at 2:00 Eastern, Mike.
That's right, 2:00 Eastern. I think an email will be going out today following this session for you to register. Again, no cost. I think you guys are promoted it for more than an hour. I think, we'll get through the core of that with likely 30 minutes tomorrow and handle Q&A as well.
Mike, I did not introduce you properly. Tell us a little bit what exactly Wolflike does and what is your niche?
Yeah, sure. So we make it more efficient for a small business borrower to find financing, to get a business loan. Overwhelmingly, we see a lot of volume within the SBA lending market. So we're connecting that small business borrower with lenders. Lenders can use Wolflike as a way to lower their acquisition cost and find a borrower they wouldn't find otherwise. Our niche, like you say, Bob, is within the franchise space. So we work with franchisors. We have deep relationships with those franchise brands, and they turn to us to give their franchisees the most efficient path for financing.
Very good. Thanks for that. What's going on with the CARE Act, Katie?
There was the report to Congress yesterday, and we reported a little bit on that, but I hadn't had a chance to watch the full video because I was preparing for yesterday's Coleman Report Live. So now that I've had the chance to really go through it, I've split up. I think we have a slide for most of the major things that they presented during the CARES Act report. And one of the first ones was Mnuchin suggested a bipartisan technical fix to the PPP, which would allow small businesses to use their loans over more than just 8 weeks. And I think Mike was saying earlier that he had heard maybe 24 weeks.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
Exactly how many.
That's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, but they do really think that, when they first started this program, everybody thought this was only going to be a couple weeks and we would be done and everybody would be back to work. And now that's just simply not true. Everyone's still, even if you're going back to work, you're not operating in full capacity yet. So they're really looking at possibly expanding that to help with some of that adjustment as we get ready to go back.
Katie, tell us about the 75% rule. I anticipate that will change as well. So what is the rule today, and how do you think that'll change?
So the 75% rule is stating that 75% of your PPP loan must be used on payroll, and that's the current rule. Now, that wasn't in the original CARES Act, and the SBA OIG did say that they thought that wasn't necessarily the intent of the CARES Act. And so they're now questioning whether or not we need to adjust that based on smaller businesses or different types of businesses who may not need 75% of it to go to that in order to operate. Maybe they need less and they need to put more toward equipment or healthcare or something like that that's going to be more important to their operating and maintaining their business.
Very good. Let's go some questions. Mike asked, do you know how the forgiveness application will be submitted to the SBA? I don't know that. Do you know that, Rossman? So
your bank will be, so it's not going to be submitted to the SBA. Well, so I guess if the bank's submitting it to SBA yet, my understanding is actually going to flow through E-Tran. That there's going to be a process through E-Tran that's going to flow, but more clarification will come out of that.
Yeah, that's going to be in what we call guidance set 2.
Well, and I didn't even add on to that real quick, Bob, and kind of where I was coming from was, again, our universe overwhelmingly, we're educating small business borrowers. And, I would really encourage all the banks on over-communicate with your borrowers. Please, please talk to them. Let them understand that changes are coming, that here's the form, that the process of uploading documents is going to shift and change over time. But over-communicate, it's going to pay dividends for you by getting less angry inquiries in due course.
That's true. Susan asked, hi, Bob. Hi, Susan. Does the SBA publish a list of PPP participating banks and the dollar amounts they've lent? They do that on a monthly basis, Susan. I anticipate they will. I don't, right now, SBA is publishing 7A and 504 results. The answer is I don't know, but I'm guessing they will disclose that. Have you heard anything on that, Mike?
I actually think the IG spoke to that, right? So I think the idea of giving clarity and transparency, I think that was somewhat mentioned in the IG report. So I think it's going to come. And actually, I think the House, the Democratic controlled house, they were really pushing for understanding every borrower's name, right? And the FOIA data historically had that information.
Yeah, they have it. They have the bank, they have the amount,
Yeah.
they have the borrower. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not changed. I don't think that's going to change. Several questions on the 1502, and based on the poll results, we will devote tomorrow and Friday to try to be more specific on helping you out with that. I think we're a little bit fuzzy because it may come out in guidance part 2, and we will do a little research on that to help everyone out, because I think all of us, including myself, I think including Katie and Mike and Lance, are a little fuzzy in terms of exactly what needs to be done. That's a pause, Mike. That's for you to jump in and get to.
Well, in fact, we're so fuzzy, Bob, that your image disappeared on me. So yeah, I think that fuzziness is, and Katie spoke to it, it's entirely consistent with the speed this thing was rolled out at. It's entirely consistent with the volume of adoption of, again, it's not 1,000 typical SBA lenders. It's now 5,000 lenders that are engaged in this thing. And the number 5,000 bank needs different education than does the top 5 lenders in the country, right? So those SBA lenders I know SBA lenders who have been anxious to start the 1502 process immediately, and they're probably frustrated it's being delayed. That credit union that did 45 loans, they need more time. They need more advice and some direction. And so it's entirely consistent with the speed this thing rolled out. Again, I think the SBA has done an extraordinarily good job, but changes were required.
So I think in answering Alan and David, I wouldn't do anything this week. I would see what guidance part 2 says, and I'll try to get an expert in here on helping everyone out, because 57% of the industry is having problems or grappling with this. I think that's a huge. We will get that information on that. Let's see. We have our Katie. Do you have anything else on your plate here?
I mean, I did have a couple more notes about the report from yesterday, and I can just go super fast through those and let everybody know what's going on with that. Some other things they were talking about, aside from the bipartisan technical fix, was they were talking about ultra-long treasury bonds, how they considered larger, 100-year even. And they really ultimately decided that 10, 20, and 30 years with low interest rates would be ideal for that. The next thing was keeping people employed. Secretary Mnuchin was kind of berated a little bit for maybe not doing everything he could to enact the CARES Act as the spirit of the CARES Act. And what he was saying was really the spirit of the CARES Act was always to keep people employed, and that's their focus going forward, and how they're going to fix everything is make sure that everything's in line with keeping people employed.
Hey, Bob, can I add to that real quick? I know you're sensitive on time, and Katie, I think that I don't typically quote the Wall Street Journal editorial board, but they had a really nice message today that said, I thought it was an on-point message of, we created this bill to protect paychecks, to actually go ahead and keep people employed, and yet Congress was yelling at Treasury and SBA for getting money out there. So, for instance, the Lakers, right? We all, the Lakers shouldn't borrow money, but if that money was deployed to actually give to the workers who were displaced from their job, then that would have been the bill's intent. So, I think it's a very difficult situation. I think Mnuchin's been, and I'm not, normally a defender, but I think he's directly trying to support paychecks, and every turn he's being criticized. I think it's very difficult.
Well, I think, and that's politics. I mean, it's easy to jump on a bandwagon when you're on either side of the aisle. But he said, hey, what I like was that quote we ran yesterday. This is bipartisan. Well, I will do whatever I'm told to do, and we want to help keep people employed. So, I mean, that's
right. And the last part was just Senator Warren said that she wants more certification for the borrower, so that they can be held personally liable for false information or misuse of the CARES Act. Some of that's already in there, and I think she just wants to be a little bit stricter on that and make sure it's not misused.
These are all great questions. I don't have answers for them, but I'll read them. Will the lender receive forgiveness confirmation prior to the lender forgiving the loan? We don't know that. Brett asks, what do you think we will have clarity on the 75% rule? That should come in guidance 2. I think that's going to come down sometime next week. Mike, have you heard?
I think it would have to. I think the attention that's being paid towards the 75% and the duration, that 8-week versus 24 weeks, I think it has to be resolved. I think it's not going to be resolved in the House bill. That's not going to go anywhere. So they're going to have to come up with some other fix.
Interesting question by Robert. Do you anticipate the SBA will forgive PPP loan amounts used to cover interest payments and commercial loan debt?
I think the answer is, so I think on mortgage debt, on commercial mortgage interest debt, that is to be forgiven, consistent with the 75% rule.
Yeah, he says not mortgage debt. What about a conventional commercial loan? Do we know?
I think more clarity has to come out of that.
Yeah, I agree. That's guidance too. And Alex says if a borrower uses funds for business costs that are not listed in the covered costs or payroll costs, is the customer just forfeiting their forgiveness or are there harsher consequences? Ooh, good question.
I think it has to do with forgiveness primarily, but there were permissible purposes. You can't just use that money to buy a boat, right? So
Rolls Royce, then
apparently you get in trouble for buying Rolls Royces and Rolexes. So I think there are squarely permissible purpose issues, and they have to be paid attention to.
Okay. Well, I think we have our marching orders for the industry. We will get more clarity in the 1502. Joseph, go to the slide, and we still have our webinar that's coming up in half an hour. You're welcome to join us. Remember, it's a double header. If you sign up today, you get next week as well, which is guidance part 2. Again, we'll do it the same way we did this one. We're assuming the guidance will be out Monday, Tuesday. If it's not, then we'll push that a little bit. And then, of course, Mike's webinar tomorrow on options on the PPP. And with that, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. It's always good to see you. Katie, thank you very much. We'll talk to you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.